Okay, we're live on a Wednesday night for the Panther-Lair Show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, hanging out with you with my headphones in, as I always do when we have Jim Hammett join us, because I want to be able to hear what he's going to say. So we're going to bring Jim in a second. But you know how we always start the show talking about whatever's going on, the whole preamble about Panther-Lair.com and youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I could really skip all of that if you people would just all subscribe to Panther-Lair.com. Like if you go to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and just subscribe to the website and hang out and get the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, and go on the message boards and talk to Pitt fans all day, every day. It's what you like to do anyway. You're a Pitt fan. You like talking about Pitt sports. So there's an opportunity to do it with the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find. If you would just go and subscribe and be on the website, I wouldn't have to talk about it every time to start these live shows or the morning pit every day. And also, if you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, I wouldn't have to talk about that as well. But there's still some of you out there who are not subscribed to either one of those things. So I got to say it again. Hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, so you never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content that we put there every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We do the morning Pitt show where we talk about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt sports on that particular day. And then, of course, the website, like I say, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the best place to get all your Pitt sports news, football, basketball, recruiting, everything going on in the world of Pitt sports. And then the message boards to talk with other Pitt fans. And I think it's the best place. If you're a Pitt fan, it's who you want to hang out, where you want to hang out to talk to other Pitt fans. You might not always agree with everyone. I don't always agree with everyone. They don't always agree with me, but at least we're there having those conversations, and that's always fun to do. So go check that out. I appreciate it. There's a lot going on this week. Everybody's got a lot to talk about on the football message boards, the basketball message boards, the baseball message boards. And we get together here on Wednesday nights to kind of bring all those conversations to the live stream for the Panther-Lair Show. And so with that, we'll bring in our good friend from Panther-Lair.com, Jim Hammett. Jim, there you are. Talk so I can hear you.
Hello, Chris.
I can hear you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. How are you tonight, Jim?
I'm doing well. Had a nice little morning of baseball to watch.
Yeah. How about that? We're going to talk about Pitt baseball for sure. Pitt getting the win over Notre Dame in the opening game of pool play. Definitely want to talk about that heading into a big game against Wake Forest tomorrow. But TRR actually put up a question like 18 minutes before the live stream even started. So, I mean, we should do it in honor of the queen of rock and roll. Tina Turner passed away today. I hear you typing on your computer, Googling Tina Turner songs. So
yeah, I got it now.
TRR asked your favorite Tina Turner song, and I hope you have options off the top of your head. I hope you don't have to look this up because she is the queen of rock and roll. Jim, your favorite Tina Turner song?
Oh, man, I'm being put on the spot. Let's see. What's number one on Spotify?
Oh, my God. I can't believe you have to look this up. I'm embarrassed for you.
Yeah, man. What's love got to do with it? Wow.
What's love got to do with it? Proud Mary. We don't need another hero. The best. Simply the best. Better than all the rest. I mean, Jim, this is the music of life here of Tina Turner. Have you heard her cover of Son of a Preacher Man? It's incredible.
Yeah, that is a pretty good one.
It's outstanding. Her cover of Proud Mary is better than the CCR version of Proud Mary. I mean, she was the best thing about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. I mean, it's a shame. She was one of the great ones, but we appreciate TRR for asking about that. Jim, you need to go school yourself on Tina Turner. I almost want to excuse you from this video tonight and just to go spend the next 56 minutes listening to Tina Turner songs. You'll be better for it. You'll thank me for having it. You'll be like, wow, that was the best 56 minutes of my day. But
I'll just come back at the end and just kind of give my synopsis. So,
right.
Yeah.
When you decide what song actually is your
listen favorite. To the whole catalog, then go from there.
I would highly recommend it. Then go watch the Ike and Tina movie with Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, there's a lot you got to catch up on. So you have a lot of work to do. You're a young man though. You'll stay up hours after this show anyway, so you can catch up on your tunes there. But since you brought up baseball, yeah, Pitt beats Notre Dame. Pitt, number 12 seed, the very last team to make it into the ACC tournament. They in pool play, and I think everybody sort of does the cram session and remember how it works with pool play. If you're the low seed, you have to win all the games to make it to the semis. You get 2 games against the other teams in your pool. And if there's a tie at the end of pool play, the advantage goes to the better seed. So if you are a 12 seed like Pitt, you got to win both games to get in. And they go and beat Notre Dame today, who I think they lost the series to earlier this year, right? They went 1-2 in the series against Notre Dame in the regular season. They win 9-5. They hit 5 home runs, turn a bunch of double plays, get really good pitching. I mean, throughout the game, bullpen was strong. Surprised by the outcome? And I don't know, what was your expectation going into Pitt Notre Dame today?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really expecting much out of Pitt because they really kind of missed their chance to make the tournament last week by just cementing it themselves, and they needed some help to even get into the tournament. So it was kind of like some newfound life, and they kind of ran with it. I mean, it was the first batter of the game. Sky Duff hits a home run, and he kind of just set the tone. And Pitt's not a stranger to making a little bit of a run in this tournament. They've made it out of pool play twice, I think in 2018 and also last year. So for whatever reason, they don't always make the tournament because there are 2 teams that do not make it, and Pitt kind of falls into that category sometimes. But when they do make it, they do make a little bit of noise.
Now, the reward for beating Notre Dame is they get to face. I mean, has Wake Forest announced their starter for tomorrow? I mean, we assume it's the best pitcher in the nation, right? I mean, there'd be no reason that they would hold him to face Notre Dame on Friday, right?
No, I wouldn't think. And I mean, the thing with Wake Forest is, looking back whenever Pitt played them in April, the final 2 games of that series was 40-4. So I don't really know if it matters how much Wake Forest, who they pitch, because their offense is so potent. And, they're not just the number 1 team in this tournament. They're the number 1 team in the country. So it's a tall task.
And they actually got, I was looking back at that game. I mean, despite, they gave up 23 runs in the game against Rhett Lauder in the series. They actually hit him, like they got 3 hits and scored 2 earned runs against him. But that didn't go so hot. I mean, I like you said, they've made noise in the tournament before. Chances tomorrow of another upset to get into the semis?
I would say about less than 3, because I mean, the ACC is always a good league, but it's very rare that the best team in the country is in the ACC. That's always an SEC team. So they're running into a bit of a buzzsaw, I think.
I think every now and then, I think interest peaks during at this point. You know what I mean? I think when Pitt has made the ACC tournament, I think people have taken more notice. There's always a conversation though about the ceiling for, I mean, any baseball program in the Northeast, certainly Pitt's baseball program. I wonder about the interest though. I mean, we saw with the Pirates in 2013 through 15. Oh, it's a baseball town. Can that extend to college? What's the ceiling on college baseball interest in Pitt if they're really, really got it going? I mean, maybe not to the level that Wake Forest is right now, but if they have a good season, if they can be ranked for a little while, make the semis, make the finals of the ACC tournament with some regularity. I mean, what do you feel like? How much interest can there really be in this program among Pitt fans?
I mean, I think it would be similar to, whenever volleyball makes a run, or whenever, I guess, soccer has made some runs recently. I mean, I don't think everyone's really going to ever attach themselves to this team, because it's going to be hard to just be consistently good. And that's obviously a problem. So, I mean, you look at their stadium, it holds like 900 people. It's not like they're going to move their games to PNC Park and start really having a big crowd. I mean, it is what it is. And, I look at the program overall because, recently we've seen within the athletic department, a lot of coaches have been fired, and Mike Bell has been hired at the same time. But I think he's almost thrown a little more of a leash almost, because just where Pitt is as a program. I mean, what's he realistically supposed to do with it?
Well, he got an extension last year too, right? I think that, and so that, as we were moving through this spring, and like Lance White got fired, and you started seeing some of that movement, it was like, softball might be on the hook. And yep, softball got fired, gymnastics got fired, and you wondered if baseball was going to be there. And that's because, I mean, the success has, I mean, so what? This was the 3rd year in a row they made the ACC tournament. Am I right about that?
Yeah, because
I think so.
The one season was canceled because of COVID, but
okay. So there's a little bit of success there, but I mean, you look at overall record, even their overall record this year, they won today and it's exciting, but I mean, they didn't really by any stretch have a good season. But with that extension though, he's probably protected for a little while. As we talk about fan interest though, ceiling on fan interest, when you get outside men's basketball and football, Because I would include women's basketball in this group of programs that we're talking about: baseball, women's basketball, softball, both soccers, volleyball, wrestling. Which one, if you had to guess, which one do you think has the highest ceiling for not success and not program success? I mean, volleyball has already accomplished that, but which one do you think has the highest ceiling for generating fan interest and sustained fan interest if the success is there?
I would think it's women's basketball. And I think that just, you kind of have to look at the sport overall across the country. I mean, the national championship this year was household names, and that was kind of cool. And you could even say you knew more about the women's Final Four than the men's from an individual player, because you knew Angel Reese, you knew Caitlin Clark. So I just think the interest in women's basketball overall across the country is a bigger deal than it was. So I think if, Pitt ever got to the point where they had a good women's basketball program, I think it would really take off, because I think even the interest in the region, I think high school girls basketball is a pretty big deal in Western Pennsylvania. So, I mean, I think if there's a third sport out there where you can make a move and, attract some fans, and if you ever put a good product together, I think it's women's hoops.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I would think probably locally, girls basketball is maybe even a little bit stronger than it was when Agnes Baronato had a little bit of run of success, where they were drawing crowds, but I mean, it was not, obviously they weren't selling out the Peterson Event Center, but I mean, they were drawing some better crowds than they've drawn in recent years. But I don't know, we'll see what can happen there. So there was basketball news. I mean, speaking of basketball, on the men's basketball front this week, just like we said last week, they were definitely going to use one of those remaining scholarships on a high school kid. I think we absolutely said that, right? Papa Kante, 4-star center. All of a sudden on Monday, it's like, hey, he's back. He's maybe interested in Pitt, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's enrolled and he's going to Pitt. First of all, how surprised were you? And second of all, what's your overall reaction just to Papa Kante joining this roster for this coming season?
Yeah, I mean, it was a total shock. I mean, because, he decommitted from Michigan, and Pitt was a finalist the first time around, but he wasn't really mentioned with Pitt in the second recruitment. I mean, that wasn't just a school. I think he visited Alabama and Georgia Tech, and, I think they might have said, oh, Pitt might have made contact, and that was the end of it. So not only did you not realize that Pitt was involved, you didn't realize they were involved to the point where he was ready to commit. So I think it caught just about everyone off guard. And I think, whenever you and I talk and we get texts and we start hearing things, and our guy Houston Wilson starts hearing things, it went from rumor to done deal in like 10 minutes. I mean, it happened that quickly, and I've never really seen anything like that.
Yeah, I think usually when that happens, it's because it's already done. It just word hasn't gotten out, and then all of a sudden it's like it's the rumors, and then you realize, oh wait, this is done. I guess it helped that he visited Pitt in the fall, so he kind of had that familiarity there. Like you said, Pitt was one of his finalists, and so I think there was some connections and relationships there. It's just funny because like I said, when we talked last week, it was, oh, what transfers are they going to get? What transfers are they going to get? I've said a bunch of times, I don't think they'll bring in another high school guy, but if there was a high school guy to bring in, a center who's a defensive guy and a rebounder who can grow and develop over the next couple of years, I mean, that's about ideal. I think it was going to be really hard to get another guard to come in here, another young guard, when you've already got Carlton Carrington and Jalen Lowe and Dior Johnson. It was going to be hard to get a young perimeter player or backcourt player, but a young center, I mean, it's almost a perfect fit. And people keep wanting, oh, they need another rebounder. Well, that's what they got, and it's a guy who can serve as, I still think serve is probably the third center. I still see Guillermo Diaz-Graham staying at the 5 with Federico. But even if he just comes off the bench now, if Federico gets 2 fouls in the first 90 seconds of a game, you don't have to spend, the next 18 and a half minutes with the Diaz-Graham twins jockeying back and forth. You can bring in a guy who maybe is not going to give you a ton of offense, but he'll run the court well. He'll rebound. He'll play defense. I said this on the Morning Pit the other day. I was like, there's nothing not to like about this edition. It seems like there's very little downside to bringing this guy in.
I have a trivia question for you.
Uh-oh.
So with Kante coming in, he's 6'10". You have Federico and Jorge and Guillermo. So 4 players over 6'10". When's the last time a Pitt basketball team had 4 guys over 6'10"?
I mean, I don't know the answer, so I'm just going to guess like Steven Adams and Ken Birch, and I don't know, were there two other really tall guys on that team?
So it was 2005.
Oh my
We're
goodness.
going back almost 20 years that Pitt has had size.
Torrey
like
Morris? Is Torrey Morris one of those guys?
Mark McCarroll.
Okay.
Aaron Gray, Chris Taft, and Levon Kendall.
Not Torrey. Wow. When did Torrey Morris play? Was he before those guys?
I think he might have been with like Julius Page, so he might have missed it by a year. But it's astounding that Pitt has this much size, and it just kind of happened. It was like, oh wow, they're huge now. So I mean, but you go back and you look at where this team kind of faltered down the stretch, and it was with rebounding. I mean, I think it was even just defending the paint. I mean, like there are two, losses in March to Duke and Xavier, obviously very good teams. But I mean, Philip Howski like really took it to him. Nunji really gave them problems from Xavier, and they just didn't have options because Federico was hurt. Now they have options. Now they have that ability that you could say their highest rated incoming recruit, a 6'10" guy that just fell in their laps, might be the third string center. That is absurd and unheard of. So it is, you're right. There's nothing to hate about this addition. I mean, he's the highest rated guy coming in of the 4-man recruiting class. I mean, that's the second straight year a 4-star recruit kind of just fell into their lap in June. And it's very commendable that the staff is open and, they're opportunistic when these things come along.
I threw it out there as him being the third string, like the third center. I mean, is that how you see it? Do you see the rotation changing at all with bringing him into the mix, or do you see him playing like a role kind of like what I described?
I mean, I think that's ultimately what I expect because I'm really high on Guillermo. I really think he's going to take a step forward, and I kind of saw some pro potential like in those 2 NCAA tournament games. So it's interesting because you're going to want to play him a lot. And obviously Federico, you know what you get with him. And I do wonder if his role changes at all just with how the backcourt's constructed and how Pitt's going to play this year. Because I think Federico kind of blended into just running and picking and rolling and letting the guards do everything. And I don't know if Pitt's going to be that same team this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy the centers because you have younger guards that might be looking to dish more, maybe more so than looking to score like last year.
It's funny. I mean, just maybe it's because they're all like really young with Johnson and Lowe and Carrington, but I just sort of picture this team being fast. You know what I mean? Like Nelly Cummings and Jamarius Burton weren't slow, but they just seemed old. You know what I mean? I mean, they were old guys, which was a strength of theirs in a lot of ways. But I just sort of picture this team really running a lot. And I think Federico can run the court. The Diaz-Graham twins can run the court a bit. Papa Kante can run the court. Having a center who can get down there for an outlet pass or a quick dish or an alley-oop. I mean, that's huge. It's easy buckets and easy points, and those guys should be able to convert it. And you're right. What I read about Papa Kante, he's 6'10", but he's got like a 7'4" wingspan. I feel like they say the same things about like Federico and Guillermo Diaz-Graham. These guys might not be. I do think Papa Kante's built. He's a little bit thicker than Federico and Guillermo. But that wingspan, though, is just, it's hard to defend against that. And those guys should be a little more developed as rebounders to, I think, excel there. It's a good addition. So what's the last spot? What do you think they do here? Transfer, I guess?
I mean, I think at this point, I think we've said all along that you probably just need to add another guard in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I didn't, of course, neither one of us expected this addition. So I guess anything's on the table. But yeah, I mean, I think you would look to add another shooter, maybe another ball handler, just something like that. And I mean, I guess at this point, you're probably not going to find another recruit like Kante to fall on your lap. You're not going to get that again. Yeah. So, I mean, are you looking at someone like a Cassius McNeely who never even made it to campus last year, but just someone you take a flyer on and see what happens? And I think that's probably what you're going to find at this point.
And I feel like we've had a theme of like, they're sort of in almost luxury position here. Like there aren't needs. I don't think there are needs. I mean, we talked about them being like 10 deep, going 2 deep at every position, basically. Now they're 11 deep, or 12 deep or whatever. I mean, they've only sort of filled it out. I still don't see a lot of like dead weight on this roster. And I think you've got a lot of guys who can play. They're not desperate to fill a spot. So I think they can be sort of selective and, well, let's find the best player. Let's find the guy who fits the best, whether it's a shooter. I agree. I think it's got to be a backcourt player. I think you want to fill that out, with another veteran and somebody who can help and provide some leadership there. But they're in a pretty good spot. I mean, it's hard to argue with this. I had a thing on the Morning Pit on Monday where I did grading the offseason and kind of talked, and I think we've probably talked about this before, where I don't know how excited people were about, Nelly Cummings, Greg Elliott, Blake Hinson, and those three, Federico and the Diaz-Graham twins last year. It was kind of like, these are the guys who are going to help the 6-year guard from Colgate who wasn't good enough to play here 7 years ago, and the backup, 3-point shooter from Marquette, and the guy who hasn't played basketball for 2 years. These are the guys who are going to get you, and they ended up being really good, obviously. And so it's hard to grade the offseason right now, but just kind of looking what Zach Austin is, looking what Ishmael Leggett is, looking at how these freshmen should fit in, and then, Papa Kante on top of it. I mean, I feel like, I don't know if you want to give it a grade, because I think it's probably better to wait a year to do that and see what they actually do. But I feel like it's a pretty effective, maybe not flashy, but I feel like pretty effective offseason for Jeff Capel.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue because you have a top 25 recruiting class and 2 transfers that were double-digit scorers for their teams last year. I mean, did you land a top 5 transfer? Did you get a 5-star recruit? No, but for Pitt, I mean, for what they are and for what they've been, that's a pretty good haul, and it's hard to be disappointed with any of it, really.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's pretty impressive, and if anything, I think the success last year, their ability to get guys who really fit what they wanted, I think buys Jeff Capel at least a little bit of latitude on, oh man, you didn't get Noah Thomas, you didn't get Joe Girard, you didn't get this guy or that guy, but you got guys that you seem to have prioritized. I mean, it doesn't feel to me like they reached for Austin and Leggett. I mean, they took those guys more than a month ago, so they were obviously priority targets. So I think they get at least a little bit of a benefit of the doubt because they did it so well last year that I'm kind of like, all right, I sort of believe you guys have an idea about how to build a roster now, and we'll see if you can pull it off. Just kind of glancing through the questions, some people have thrown out a few transfer candidates. I haven't found a lot of connections with Pitt. Pitt Chag mentioned DeMarco Dunn from North Carolina and Zion Pullen from one of the Cal schools. I forget. I don't know, one of the Cal schools, UC schools. And Brock Madonic then mentioned Ray J. Dennis. I don't know. Are there any names, I guess, that jump out to you from the transfer portal right now as potential options? I mean, I sort of feel like you said, it's sort of we hear about the name and then like 2 days later they're in or they're out. Are there any names that you're keeping an eye on at this point in the portal?
I mean, I haven't really tracked any that were at least directly contacted by Pitt, because like you said, with some of the more recent ones, like I think Taylor at Marshall was in the portal for a couple of days and he was gone. So I mean, it's seemingly, like you said, there's a lot of fast turnover at this point. So I don't have anyone specific in mind. It'll be interesting to see if, how long did the staff really know they were going to get Kante, and how were they working the other avenues while this was all happening. So that's kind of how they're going to approach it. But I mean, I think at this point, like you said, it's probably going to be a guard. It's probably going to be a mid-major type of guard. And there's still, a couple hundred of those in the portal right now?
Yeah, maybe like a City Nadir type of guy, you know what I mean? Who kind of sees the depth you have and doesn't come in expecting a starting job, just wants to be a part of the program, play in the ACC, get that opportunity. I mean, that's probably, I feel like the Ivy League is the place to look. You know what I mean? I think go find an Ivy League guard who, has to transfer, right? Don't all the Ivy League guys have to, they can't do grad transfer their graduate years. So you get all these grad transfers out of the Ivy League. Go find an Ivy League guard who's going into grad transfer. You can be a good locker room guy and, go do that. I think that's the best option. Important stuff here from Patrick McKinney as a super chatter. And I guess this question is for you, because I don't even know what these words mean. Santos versus Pizza Mans. Are these Johnstown things? Does this have to do with the flood? What's Patrick asking about here, Jim?
These are pizza places in Johnstown. I know, Patrick. What's going on, man? I have.
What's the answer?
The answer is Santa's. It's the Johnstown classic.
Is this some of that Weird Altoona stuff with the slice of cheese and a jalapeno on it?
No, we don't associate with that. This is just normal everyday pizza.
Nobody associates anything with Altoona. I'll stop at the Sheets in Tyrone before I stop at the Sheets in Altoona. And I mean, why would you ever go to Tyrone? But I do that. All right. I think a more relevant question from Patrick here says Djokovic versus Keaton Slovis' stats from last year. I think obviously you want a better touchdown to interception ratio, but this is probably something we'll talk about throughout the summer. Quick answer to your guy Patrick. What do you see Djokovic surpassing Slovis's stats, and by how much, or not at all?
I mean, I think there's nowhere to go but up. And I saw a stat recently about Keaton Slovis, and he was the worst Power 5 quarterback on third downs this year.
First and second too.
Yeah, really. But, I mean,
I shouldn't say that. That's. I don't want to. We spent a lot of time last week talking about Pat Narduzzi. Sort of like taking shots at the guys who are not there anymore. We don't want to bring that to the Panther-Lair show. That's not our game. But sorry, go ahead.
No, but I think that's where you need to make an improvement. And like you said, touchdown to interception ratio. I mean, you can live with 9 interceptions. The issue last year is with 10 touchdowns. I mean, your offense just was not putting points on the board. I mean, I think any team, people throw interceptions. It's part of college football. But if your passing offense is only generating 10 offensive touchdowns, I mean, there's not a big secret why they lost to teams like Georgia Tech and Louisville.
Yeah. It is that 10 touchdown number. I mean, you're right. I said touchdown to interception, but I mean, it's like, you can't throw 10 touchdowns in how many games did you play? 11 games. I mean, you have to do better than that unless you're playing at like Navy. And I bet the Navy quarterback threw more touchdowns than that. I mean, it's just, it's an unacceptable number. All right. So then coming back to Djokovic, then what's the bar? 20, 23, 24,
I mean,
27?
I think if he gets to 20, I mean, that's a significant upgrade in the offense. And I mean, I don't know if Rodney Hammond in the running game is going to be as good as Kante was this past year, but I have reason to think they'll still be a pretty effective running game. So if you add another 10 passing touchdowns to this offense, then all of a sudden, there's significant improvement. Again, then at that point, you have to wonder, does the defense hold par?
That's our. I feel
it's like you figure out one, but then it's like, oh yeah, this.
Well, it's going to be. I was just looking at the defensive scholarship board, and we're talking about young positions here and there. Oh, they got all the youth that they're rolling in on the defensive line, and all the youth in the secondary this year. Well, like it's very conceivable that they go into next year. Like Shane Simon's already going to be gone. Very conceivable that Bengali Kamara could leave, and if Solomon DeShields plays well as the starter this year, very possible that next year's the 2024 linebackers could be Brandon George, and then all guys who are freshmen or redshirt freshmen this year. So giant gap in classes, and so you'll be past the youth movement on the line and in the secondary, but in the middle you'll have all these brand new guys stepping in. So it'll just be continuous transition, and you'll have a new quarterback too. So you'll be trying to figure out probably a new running back. But I mean, I guess it's college football, right? That's what happens. You have transition. Let's see. Wolf HD has a good question here. If Dior Johnson lives up to his talent and hype next year, how far can Pitt go? Top 4 in the ACC tournament, Sweet 16, Elite 8. Jim, I'll let you answer that.
I mean, I guess you have to look at it. Is Dior Johnson the key to Pitt's team this upcoming season?
I think he's pretty important.
I think he is.
He's pretty high on the list.
I think there's a lot of question marks beyond just him, because you're replacing 4 guards instead of just 1. So, I mean, he has a big role because he's going to kind of have to be Burton and Nelly Cummings all in one a little bit, and that's a lot to ask of anyone. So, I mean, if he ends up being the top 50 player and, maybe the top 10 player he used to be when he was like a junior and sophomore in high school, I mean, I think Pitt could be a top 5 team in the ACC again. I don't know how far that translates into the tournament, but I think they can still be a very good ACC basketball team if he's playing at that kind of level.
Would we say, what was that? I think last year, what did I keep saying? I feel like I kept saying Blake Hinson was the X factor for the team. I forget if I said that or not. Would you say Dior Johnson is the X factor this year? And I think what I mean by that is I think what you're going to get out of Hinson now, right? I mean, he should be the team's leading scorer again. You kind of know that. And so by default, he's sort of the most important player on the team. But I think what you're going to get out of him. I think what you're going to get out of the centers. Slight improvement over last year. You should be able to rely on a certain level of play from Austin and Leggett. the other freshmen, Carrington and Lowe, yeah, you'll find out. But Dior Johnson's going to be in such a prominent role that I feel like he could be the difference. You know what I mean? He could be the X factor in 18 wins and 23 wins.
I mean that's probably a fair way of looking at it, because I mean he's going to have a huge role, and I mean everyone thinks he's really good. We haven't seen it yet. I mean, but everyone thinks so. I mean, if he lives up to it, then yeah, he could be very good, and Pitt could really benefit from having a really good point guard.
It's going to be. I'm more intrigued by watching him this year than I was like Nelly Cummings. And no disrespect to Nelly, but I mean, there's such a high ceiling here, and there's so much potential. And like you said, I mean, it's been. I mean, there was talk at one point in his high school career of being a lottery pick. So I mean, this guy had that potential. He had that high ceiling, and I don't know. I'm really interested. I'm more intrigued by Dior Johnson this year than I was last year by Dior Johnson. So I'm really maybe because I know he's going to be in a more prominent role, whereas last year you thought he was going to be working behind Nelly or next to Nelly, or I don't know. X Factor. He's the X Factor. You know who's the X Factor, Jim?
Chris Gates.
Chris Gates is our X Factor. That was good. How did you do that? I'm impressed.
4 weeks in a row.
Well, we talk about Chris all the time. Chris, he sponsors the show, Chris Gates Fitness. Everybody's probably heard about him by now. He's a huge Pitt fan. He's an online fitness coach. He works with people all over the world to chase their fitness goals, whether it's building muscle or burning fat or just creating healthy lifestyle habits. Chris can help. He's pumping out a ton of valuable content and info in his podcast right now. You should definitely check it out if you're not. His latest episodes have been on everything you need to know about protein, carbs, and fat. And he also has a new episode on how to recover from your workouts and make more progress. If you go to your podcast platform, wherever you listen to podcasts, search for Chris Gates Fitness. It's Gates is Gates. Chris Gates Fitness. You can also go to his website, chrisgatesfitness.com/podcast. To find links on where you can listen and subscribe to check out his stuff. And look, there's a lot of Pitt fans who I think have found out about Chris through our podcast, who've been sort of connected with Chris through it. And I think they've gotten a lot of valuable information, a lot of help, and he's helped a lot of people. So if you're looking for that kind of advice, suggestions, information, content, chrisgatesfitness.com/podcast, or just search Chris Gates Fitness on any podcast platform. So we appreciate Chris supporting the podcast as always. Let's scroll down here. General So's Chicken has a question. With the playoff expanding to 12 teams, and this is particularly relevant given some news about the ACC today, but with the playoff expanding to 12 teams, does Pitt have realistic expectations to get in? I went to you first on the last couple of questions. I'll start here. Do they have realistic expectations to get in? I mean, I can't say they're going to be an overwhelming favorite to make the playoff in most years. I think what it always sort of comes back to is this idea of Pitt kind of working in cycles where the floor always is 8 wins in a regular season, and you build up over a series of years, and you hit that 1 or 2 years where you really got it together, where you've got veteran players, talented players, experienced players at the right positions, and then you can actually make your run. 2021 was that year where they could make their run. We've seen different years like that over the decades. And usually, I mean, there's usually something that sort of they shoot themselves in the foot and they fall short of making their run. But you want to build up to that point where you're ready to make a run. And in those years, yes, they might have a chance, and maybe even a better chance with a 12-team playoff. Realistic expectations to make it on any kind of consistent basis? No, probably not. They're going to have to build toward it. And then when they hit that point, they're going to have to play their cards right and get a little lucky and take advantage of every opportunity they get. That's what I think. What are your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, consistently, I can never really expect Pitt to make the college football playoffs on a year-to-year basis, but the ACC champion can always make the college football playoffs, and Pitt's capable of winning the ACC championship like they showed 2 years ago. So, I mean, like you said, on those right years, after those 8-4 cycles, if they have the right quarterback play, the defense is there, and they have a good playmaker on offense, it can come together. So, I mean, yeah, I think right now, like you said, Pitt needs to kind of maintain what they are, have that good defense, be in a position that 1 or 2 things kick the right way, then they can take advantage and win the ACC.
I mentioned about the ACC news that came today. They are going to do a, I forget what they call it, incentive-based revenue split or something, but it's just from postseason revenue. So basically, if you make the playoffs, you're going to get a bigger chunk of the playoff payout than the teams that didn't make the playoffs. And I think it would be a great irony, since they've been talking so much about this, if Florida State never actually makes the playoffs, to get an extra piece of that pie after they've been whining and complaining so much publicly, and they finally get what they're asking for, which is, sort of success-based revenue sharing, uneven revenue sharing, and then they don't actually get a piece of it because they don't make the play. I think Clemson's going to be fine. I mean, they're going to get extra money. Miami somehow keeps getting their name lumped in there. They either have really good PR people, or I don't know, everyone's just sort of confused about it, but they're not making the playoffs anytime soon. I mean, Miami's given no indication that they're capable of doing that kind of thing. And Florida State is a lot of hype right now, but it would be funny if the next few years they just don't actually pull it off. I think we talked about this before, though, about the unequal revenue sharing, right? So I don't think we're surprised that they went to it, or surprised it happened as quickly as it did. I sort of thought that the wheels of bureaucracy would spin a little bit slower here.
Yeah, I don't know if the rumblings of last week kind of made things move a little bit faster. I'm guessing not, because that all still just kind of sounded like a lot of whining to me. But I mean, I'm not too surprised, and I think it's the right move. I mean, I think the champion of the league should make more money than the last place team in the league. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I mean, to a degree, I think that kind of happened slightly already. I think didn't the ACC tax returns come back from 2021, and Pitt made a couple $1 million more than the next team. So, I mean, to a small extent, that was already happened. Now it's just going to happen on a larger scale.
Yeah. And I guess it's about the like playoff payouts and the NCAA tournament payouts, and that money will be a little bit more success-based, which it is funny to like look over the last 2 seasons or so. Pitt would have done pretty well. They would have, I mean, they didn't make the playoffs, but I think on the whole, Pitt would have probably made out. And it was interesting to see that they made the most money for 2021. So just sort of sneaking around there. And then I don't know if you follow much of these other stories with the Big Ten and Pac-12, but I just can't stop laughing about the Big Ten screwing up. I guess Kevin Warren is who's going to ultimately take the fall for it, but the Big Ten screwing up on when they could give their championship game to NBC or something. Now they owe Fox like $40 million. And the Pac-12 like screwing up their package or their contract too. And they have to give a bunch of money back. And Washington State is freezing all new hires because they have to pay all this. Like, I guess it's just a reminder that no organization is too big to like be stupid. You know what I mean? It just make dumb mistakes. I'd like to think that these conferences have enough lawyers and accountants in place that they would not make these kind of mistakes. But I mean, $40 million, it's a small amount in the grand scheme of things, but it's still also a heck of a lot of money to make, that kind of mistake. And I don't know, given as much bluster as we get from Big Ten country, I appreciate when they look like a bunch of fools every now and then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think just this entire jumping conferences, the whole conference reshuffling, there was a lot of people just making the first move they can, not realizing that they should probably think about it. And this is just kind of a great example of that.
Who do you think there's anyone who regrets the moves they've made or will regret the moves they've made? Like Texas, Oklahoma, USC, UCLA included here.
I wonder if there's a point where UCLA football is not really buzzing, and they're we've seen some empty Rose Bowls, and if they're not playing well and they're having to travel to Minnesota in November, there might be a little buyer's remorse. Obviously, money is great, and Maryland and Rutgers keeps telling everyone how great money is. So
it helps.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, you can. I guess it's easier to swallow if your teams aren't that good, if you're making a lot of money while doing it. So I'll be interested to see if the whole California Big Ten really works out.
All right, question here. It's a good question. TRR says, a veteran who hasn't been talked about much but has been okay when he has played is DeAndre Jules. Do you think he finds his way into the D tackle rotation? I think so. They need somebody who's going to make plays. And I don't know if DeAndre Jules is going to be the guy who makes plays, but Devin Danielson, Tyler Bentley, David Green, great team guys, great leaders, but they haven't been productive defensive tackles in their career. I think Sean Fitzsimmons can be that. I think Isaiah Neal will be that. DeAndre Jules has been around for a while. You see him being in that mix. I think the D tackle rotation as a whole is really interesting. I mean, what do you see happening there?
Yeah, I think the thing with Jules, and over the years, Charlie Partridge has always singled him out and praised him. But at the same time, we've never really seen him actually get onto the field much during the game. So he always must do these crazy things at practices, but he never really gets on the field. And I mean, rightfully so. I mean, there's been some really good defensive tackle play at Pitt. So it's not like he's doing anything wrong. It's like you play Kalijah Cansey if you have Kalijah Cansey. So I mean, with the position overall, I think they have almost 6, 7 guys they can trust to play. I mean, and like you said, I don't know if they have a playmaker just yet. I'm very optimistic on what Sean Fitzsimmons could ultimately be. I don't know if he's going to be that just this season, but I think Jules kind of falls into the category with the other seniors, guys that can, eat snaps, take on blockers, make a few plays here and there. But and so, yeah, I mean, to answer the question, I think he'll definitely be in the rotation.
Voodoo IPA asks, how was the final meal at Fuel and Fuddle? And if you could reopen Fuel and Fuddle in a new area, where would it go? Jim, did you ever make it to Fuel and Fuddle? Or did you?
I did not have one final meal, but I did see all the recipes floating around on Twitter this week.
Yeah, that was a nice thing to do. I think they're still open for 2 more days. I think the 26th was going to be their last day. So you still have an opportunity. I think. I don't know if they changed that or not. We went a week or 2 ago, maybe not this past weekend, but last weekend, and it was great. The food was really good. I've been really, I'm almost to the point where I kind of hate going out to eat because service is bad, everything's really expensive, and the food generally just is not that great and not really worth the whole cost of it all. But Fuel and Fuddle was absolutely worth it. I mean, it was a little expensive, but food is everywhere. And the food was great. I'm going to miss it. If I could open it anywhere in a new area, I would put it in Mount Lebanon because that's close to where I live. And I think the owner is from Mount Lebanon or lives in Mount Lebanon. So he should just open one in the mall out here so we can, so I can get some more Fuel and Fuddle, because it really is one of the better restaurants in Oakland. And I'd forgotten how good it is. So it's a shame on you for missing out on it. Sorry, Jim. So too bad, but we're not going to put it in Johnstown. So that's not going to happen.
That'd be more convenient for me, but
not going to put it in Johnstown. Not going to put it in Altoona. Nowhere there. Let's see here. I'm scrolling through. Oh, you know what? Also, they announced the kickoff time for Notre Dame today. Did you see that? 3:30 p.m. I forget. Have you? You didn't cover that game for us in 2018, right? I think I went out there.
No, I was not there.
Okay. Have you been to a game there?
When I was 10. It was a long time ago.
That doesn't really count. Yeah. Are you planning on going to that game out there this year?
That, it's interesting because my best friend's getting married and the wedding date was actually that day, but the venue messed up. So the wedding date has been moved, which would allow me to go to South Bend if I wanted to.
It's I'm sure we've talked about this before. I mean, it is an experience that it lives up to the billing, I guess is what I would say. You know what I mean? For as many things don't live up to the billing, that one does live up to it. It's really it's a cool place to watch a game. 3:30. I think we've talked about this before too. I think 3:30 is one of the best possible start times. I mean, noon is always ideal because you get out earlier, but I love the whole transition of the game that starts at 3:30. It's, blazing hot, but by the fourth quarter, it's dark, the lights are on. It's a cool vibe. And then doing that at Notre Dame, I mean, this is about as good. Again, noon is always the best start time for people like you and I. But 3:30 is a pretty close second. That's a pretty good one. Speaking of that game and sort of thinking of the schedule, there's a guy on Twitter, I don't know who it is, claims to have some sort of analytics or something like that, and was ranking strength of schedule. I don't know if you saw this. I put it on the message board. And he ranked it according to, by whatever his metrics are, the number of wins an average top 25 team should expect against that schedule. And so, the toughest schedule was like Florida. An average top 25 team should expect like 7.4 wins against Florida's schedule this year, largely because he thinks the SEC is the greatest thing. Conversely, I think Boston College was like the easiest schedule, according to this guy. An average Power 5 team or an average top 25 team should expect 10 wins against that schedule. So for Pitt, he said an average top 25 team should expect 9.2 wins against Pitt's schedule. I feel like we've gone back and forth about this before. I know Pitt fans have talked about it a lot before, about how this schedule looks. Obviously, having 3 Power 5 teams in the non-conference is not ideal, but one of them was not Power 5 when they scheduled that series. Another one, the ACC scheduled for them. And the third one's West Virginia, and you're not going to do anything about that. What's the most challenging game on this schedule? Is it the trip to Notre Dame? Is it the home game against Florida State? Is it the backyard brawl in Morgantown? Is it something else I'm not thinking of right now?
I mean, I think, yeah, you would probably say Notre Dame and Florida State. And the interesting thing with that is those games are back to back. So they kind of feed off each other because they're difficult because of, the game after or game before. I mean, so I'm probably leaning there. I mean, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be all that great. I mean, obviously, Marcus Freeman did not have a great first year. There's talent. They're probably going to be better. I mean, and obviously playing out there makes it tough. I'm still interested about this Florida State team because we're hearing a lot. And, you mentioned it would be funny that if they did not make it. But, I mean, they're obviously talented. But a couple years ago, I think it was 2020, Pitt really took it to Florida State. And it wasn't even really all that great of a Pitt team. And it wasn't that long ago. So it kind of showed how far away the two programs were. So I'm sure the gap is closed and Florida State's a lot better. But that'll be a tough game, and that'll probably be the best crowd at Heinz or Acrisure this year.
Yeah, I would think so. Will Z says Notre Dame is a toss-up for this season. I think the defense will play well, but the offense will either sink or swim by that point. I see a game similar to the last time Pitt was out there with Jeff George Jr. debacle. It's funny. There's a lot of ways to refer to games by some sort of like memorable moment, but referring to that as the Jeff George Jr. game is that's pretty spectacular. I mean, yeah, that was a debacle. Trying to sneak Jeff George Jr. onto the field in a punter jersey so they could run a fake punt was a debacle. But that said, I cannot shake the distinct feeling of driving out of that stadium thinking they played pretty damn well and like impressively well. And that was right on the heels of when they beat Syracuse at home in overtime, took off knocked off a ranked Syracuse team. And I distinctly remember, I have this memory, and I might have told you the story before, I forget. Day after the game, I'm driving home. It's a long drive back to Pittsburgh. And I'm thinking about it. And I'm like, man, okay, so they had a terrible game at North Carolina, got embarrassed on a lot of levels at Central Florida. And then they came home and knocked off Syracuse in overtime. And they went out to Notre Dame and they lost, but they lost a close game. They battled. And I'm thinking like, this team might be turning a corner. They look good. And I got a phone call from a mutual friend, and we're talking, and someone at Pitt, we're talking about this or that. It's like, I said to him, I said, you guys, pretty good win against Syracuse last week, and you look pretty good yesterday. I mean, the rest of your schedule doesn't look all that intimidating. I said, I mean, you guys could go on a little run. And this mutual friend, I'll tell you off the air who it was, he says, Chris, could you imagine if we end up getting to Charlotte? And I was like, whoa, take it easy, man. Let's like you beat Syracuse and you look good against Notre Dame. Let's not get crazy. I mean, yeah, you have Duke, Virginia Tech, and Wake ahead of you. You can win all those games. So let's not get too wild. Of course, we know how that panned out, but that was one of the most like encouraging losses. I don't know if you remember what your reaction was to that game, but that was one of the most encouraging losses that I can remember because I mean, they took them down to the wire. I mean, they played Notre Dame toe to toe. They were ahead in the game. I think Ian Book was the quarterback at that point, right? Would that have been Ian Book or was that?
Yeah.
Was he? Yeah, okay. And he was like, I feel like he got hot as the game went on, but they generally played pretty well. And that was that like a turning point with that Syracuse and Notre Dame game. Do you remember your reaction to that game? I know it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think I look back on that game, and that's kind of one of the first times I really kind of started to see Pitt becoming this really good defensive team. Because not that Notre Dame's known for their offense, but it was kind of a turning point because Rashad Weaver was making plays. I think they had a couple interceptions, and they ran the ball. I think Maurice French had a kick return. So I mean, they stood up to a pretty good team on a big stage, and they didn't look out of place. So that was kind of the first time I thought, okay, they're Narduzzi's at least figuring something out. And, of course they did go on that run. So I guess it wasn't fool's gold.
Yeah. I think there were even moments in 2017 where the defense played really well. When they lost to North Carolina, the defense basically gave up one drive, but they played pretty well against that. They lost to NC State and I think gave up a punt return touchdown to Naeem Hines, was it? It was one of those guys. I think they had two backs, and one of them had a punt return touchdown, and there was like one other like kind of fluky play, but they played real. Anyway, there was, I think, 17 and 18 was sort of the defensive turnaround, especially after the debacle of 2016 on defense. But yeah, at that point, I agree with you. I think that, of course, we talk about the defensive turnaround. I think they gave up 45 to Duke the next week. And Daniel Jones, I think they won that game like 54-45. So
yeah,
maybe the defensive turnaround had to wait another week until the Virginia game. But your point stands. I think in the big picture, they were turning it around. They just got torched by Daniel Jones after that.
You know what I meant.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the reality is, like, this defense is always, like, no matter how good they are, no matter how much they're rolling, no matter how dominant they look, there's always a possibility of like a 500-yard game. It can always happen, no matter against any opponent, anytime. They can if you have a quarterback with a pulse, you have a chance of putting up 500 yards on this defense. It's just how it goes. I mean, so and that guy ended up being a first-round draft pick, right? So it wasn't the worst, beating that they've taken, but that's always a possibility. Our friend RJC Man 38 says playing 11 games against the Power 5 teams is the problem this year. And like I said, yeah, they have 3 non-conference Power 5 games. They have 11 games against Power 5 competition this year. But Cincinnati wasn't a Power 5 team when they scheduled them. The ACC schedules Notre Dame, so that's out of your hands. And the other one is the backyard brawl. You're not going to quit that series. So yes, they have 3 non-conference games against Power 5, but like it's not their fault. You know what I mean? They didn't intend to do it. They didn't set out. It's not like when they played Oklahoma State and Penn State in the same year back to back. They didn't set out to do it this year. You know what I mean? It's not. I can't blame this on Heather Lyke.
No, I mean, I don't think there's a problem. I guess the only option they could have tried to buy their way out of the Cincinnati series, but they recruit a lot of the same kids as Pitt and Cincinnati, and they would probably use that against Pitt. Like, oh, look, they don't even want to play us. So, I mean, I think you could just bite the bullet and, play them twice.
Yeah. So you have 2 years where you play Big 12 teams, 2 Big 12 teams in back-to-back years. I mean, one of them's West Virginia. You're not going to drop that series. I think there was, if you roll the clock back, there was no need to schedule that Oklahoma State series in 16 and 17. I think the Penn State series was already on the books. There was no need to add another Power 5 home and home to that. You have Penn State. That's fine. That's enough. But I mean, you're never going to complain about a West Virginia series. You have no say over the Notre Dame series. And again, Cincinnati was not a Power 5 team. But yeah, they're a good program, but who knows? I forget when they scheduled it. I mean, they might have been in the Butch Jones era or the Tommy Tuberville era or something when they scheduled it. So it might not have been quite as scary as it is now. And Cincinnati's not what they were a year ago. You know what I mean? They're not what they were 2 years ago. I mean, they're going to take a step back this year. It shouldn't be a game that concerns you quite as much. Brock McDonagh says he thinks the toughest game is going to be Carolina because of Drake May, which comes back to our anybody can throw for 500 yards on any moment. If you have a quarterback with a pulse, if you have a good quarterback, it's liable to happen. Do you see any fall off with Drake May this year? Or do you think he's, there was the big Sam Howell hype, right? Heading into 2019, I think it was. And he was okay, or was it heading into 2020?
It was heading into 2021. It was
21. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he was fine, but I mean, he didn't win the Heisman. You know what I mean? He wasn't quite on that level. Do you think Drake May builds on what he did last year, though?
I kind of do. I was really impressed with him. I was down in Chapel Hill that day, and he really picked Pitt apart. And that was the game wherever Elijah Cansey, I think, was ejected for a targeting. And you could just tell when he went out of the game, like Drake May didn't really have a whole lot to worry about. Like he just felt pretty comfortable back there.
Yeah, that one was tough. Will Z points out, side note, last time Pitt was out at Notre Dame, the Pitt fan showing was pretty large. Something that doesn't get said enough is how well Pitt fans travel to destination games. Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's always those videos and pictures of the Pitt fans in 2016 who went to Clemson. You and I have talked about really since the last 2 seasons, Pitt fans have really traveled well. I mean, they showed up big time in Charlotte in 21, and I think they traveled well to the road games that year. And I think they traveled pretty well. You were at what road games did you go to this past season? Did you go to all of them? No.
No,
Like
I went to Virginia and North Carolina.
Okay. Did you go to the Sun Bowl? I forget. No.
But
I think you could even tell. I mean, I think you could see it when you were there, and I think you could tell on TV that Pitt fans were showing up. I mean, I think there were good crowds. I think they traveled well. And he's right. I mean, Notre Dame draws people, so there's going to be a big Pitt fan contingent there, and if they can get a little momentum, then it'll be fun. Will Z also asks, biggest question of the night: does the River City Rivalry Trophy make a return? That big old stupid boat engine stick. So it's still in Cincinnati, right? Because Pitt lost in 2012. So
I wonder what they did with
first
it.
year. Yeah, I'm curious if they've held on to it or not. Maybe Luke Fickell took it with him to Wisconsin. I wonder if you try and smuggle that out. You know what I mean? When you change coaching jobs, is that one of the things you pack up into your boxes and take with you?
I mean, I hope the trophy's back. I think it would be great.
Does Pitt? Sometimes they'll like list, the games on their schedules on the official website. Let me look. I mean, I don't think they would list it as that. No, they don't list anything. I thought they might even list like, Backyard Brawl or River City Rivalry. They don't list it. I haven't seen anything about whether or not they're going to. I mean, they should brand it as such. Why not? I mean, you went to a lot of trouble to make it the River City Rivalry, 20 years ago. You might as well do it now. You already built the trophy. It's been broken. It's been thrown around. I mean,
somebody has it.
Yeah, as long as it exists somewhere. I mean,
they need to bring it back.
Yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't. I mean, that's just me. All right. Let me see here if there's anybody else. Other good questions here. Mostly just talk about the schedule. Let's see. Wolf HD says, I don't understand the UNC hype. I get Drake May is great, but they have nothing else. Their best offensive players the past 2 years are gone, and Carolina's best defenders from last year transferred. I mean, I think there's turnover, but I also think by the rankings, they've recruited pretty well over the last few years, right? I mean, they should be in position to rebuild and reload and bring more guys in, right? I mean, that should be this should be a talented roster, right? They shouldn't be lacking for talent.
No, and I mean, but if your best player is your quarterback, that can mask a lot of other problems. So I mean, I get what you're saying. They did lose a lot, and they've been a little underwhelming. But I mean, the recruiting rankings are there, and if you have a quarterback of that high caliber, he's going to have someone to throw to.
Yeah. If you want to bring up the fact that they still have Mac Brown as their head coach, who is, I think has had some deficiencies over the years, as far as his success and what he's accomplished as a head. I mean, he's accomplished enough. I mean, he's got a ring. He's got more rings than I do. So I can't really talk down too much on his accomplishments, but I think he's also shown some questionable. I mean, like last year. I mean, I think last year should have been better than it was for Carolina. I mean, I think they should have had a better regular season than they did. Even though they won the Coastal. I mean, I forgot what their record ended up being, but they had a bad loss or two down the stretch. Did they lose to NC State or somebody like that? Or what they
ended up going to the Holiday Bowl, and I think they had expectations like of doing a little bit better. So they did falter down the stretch a bit.
Yeah. Well, that's also the downside when Clemson wins it but doesn't make the playoff. You end up, it screws up the whole bowl thing. Will Z points out that they lost to Georgia Tech. So that's who loses to Georgia Tech. Jeez, terrible. With an interim coach, no less. Nobody loses to Georgia Tech. All right. I think that's good. Jim, any final parting words for the people here on a Wednesday night?
Maybe the greatest upset in college baseball history happens tomorrow morning.
Oh, look at you.
But probably not.
Well, I mean, look, kudos to them for getting the win today. And I mean, if they pull it off and win, I mean, you could definitely say they earned their way into the semifinals by beating the, arguably best team in America, best pitcher in America. So we'll see, but it's fun to watch, and hopefully we get to see another game on Saturday. But Jim, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Head over to Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I'll be on the message boards. Jim will be there too, talking about all things in Pitt sports. So thanks again to everybody tonight. We will see you tomorrow morning for the morning pit right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.